From the Edge of the Web studios, here's what we're looking at this week.
From Search Engine Land by Henry Powderly, experts tout voice search as a study ties answers to the top 3 organic results. All right, this is from SEMrush. They unveiled at the SMX Advanced, last week it was, they suggested the key to voice performance is high SERP placement, site speed, content readability, and high quality. So they actually ran a study on, let's see here, how many different, like 50,000 queries across 3 devices, Google Home, Google Home Mini, and Google Assistant. Oddly enough, Alexa's not in that mix, is it? Interesting. But they ran a query, and out of the top answered searches with voice search, 60% of the results came from featured snippets and 70% overall came from SERP features. And out of those, a good deal of these had very strong backlink fingerprints as well as faster sites and mobile content, obviously. And deeper dive in the article shows that on top of everything else, we've been talking about schema for your websites for a long time. About 36% of the sites that came up had no schema actually associated in the code. So that's interesting in its own right. But Susan, what do you think about voice search and what we're seeing from the correlative factor here?
So I think it's interesting because, I don't work on the SEO side, but a lot of my industry friends are SEOs. So I kind of pick up on what's happening just based on what they're talking about frequently. And it's interesting to me that it seems like there's almost like a separate algorithm or, factors at play when it comes to what's powering voice search. And the first thing I thought was, are they going to have black hat voice search people where it's like, that's literally, they'll have like this whole new culture of people that are trying to exploit the voice search piece now that they can't exploit, the search results quite as easily.
Right.
So when I saw that, I just thought it was interesting because I'm curious what kinds of stop gaps they're going to have to put in place that they haven't found yet or thought of yet.
Yeah, there's a whole new frontier that we really don't know yet what's going to pan out, because on voice search, there's one answer, right?
Yeah.
And it could very well be you start seeing a massive manipulation in that space until Google comes through and does a whack-a-mole on that side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm just curious, like, what that's going to look like, because not that position 1 isn't important, because it still is, but I think the understanding of how important it is or isn't has changed just because there are, the featured snippets now, and there's like local map stuff that like, it's just gotten pushed so far down the page. It's interesting to see that it seems like this data kind of renews the number 1 position is super, super important thing. So It's just going to be kind of interesting to see if people start like kind of rushing to one tactic or another that manipulates it before Google figures it out. And to your point, plays whack-a-mole and gets it fixed.
Well, that's a really good point, because there was a good deal of distress about the organic position, number 1, and the clamoring to get into position 0, which is the rich snippet and knowledge panel placement here. And yeah, you're absolutely right, is that if voice search is actually really being guided by those top 3 results, right?
Yep.
It could be we've been seeing the first place or the position 1 dropping further and further down the radar. Maybe, I'm surprised that they're actually not picking up their own AMP content, to be honest with you. Well, probably a little bit of nepotism down the way there. All right.
Just a bit.
Talk about nepotism. Here's a segue for you from Marketing Land from Amy Guesting Hughes. We love her content on a regular basis. Instagram advertisers.
Awesome. I love Amy.
We got to get her on the show. We haven't had her on the show yet, and we've always been citing her articles. But this one's really interesting. For Instagram advertisers, you can actually now convert your organic influencer posts into ads. The company confirmed in March it was testing this new ad format with a select group of brands. So here's the deal, is that they're actually rolling out branded content ads for all advertisers, making it possible for brands to create ads using the organic posts from influencers that have relationships with. And that's the most important part. The company said the branded content ads will be available for all advertisers in the coming weeks, and the branded ads for stories will roll out over the next few months. Before brands can use the influencers, the content creator must grant their business partners, the brands that they have relationships with, access to promote those posts. And that's the critical thing, is that you just can't scoop up some influencer who's referencing your brand. You got to have that relationship. So this is getting closer and closer to the social ad side of things. It's pretty important, but is this going to kind of devalue that organic post if the followers of that influencer all of a sudden see it's a promoted post for a brand? What do you think?
It's a good question. I think that's really the big question, is how big of a deal is it when it seems like it's, an organic kind of recommendation from an influencer. I think even though people probably know that they have a relationship with the brand, it still comes off as very organic, as opposed to, like in the past, if they had a sports person that spoke for Nike or whatever, like that was very obviously a sponsorship situation, but it doesn't feel that way in Instagram usually. So I'm curious to see what it looks like when it is promoted. Like, does it feel like it's promoted? Does it just kind of feel like, oh, this is promoted because this person said this nice thing, as opposed to this is promoted because we gave the product to this person and paid them money?
Right.
I'm just curious to see how it kind of comes off. And I think in those instances, the way that it's presented and the way that it's framed with the ad copy is gonna make or break how well it does or doesn't do. And I think it'll be interesting to see what it does to influencer marketing, because if brands don't handle that creative piece well, and it just feels like icky and bot placement, they're gonna, I think, start to devalue the influencer relationship. So I'm curious to see how that impacts. I mean, there's already questions around like, is that a bubble? Does it really do anything? How is it measurable? There's so much around that to begin with that I think it's going to get super interesting when they start putting ad dollars behind it, because then they're actually spending, money that they feel that they can measure a direct ROI on.
Now, we're going to talk about kind of the jaded user that's in social media now here into our interview. But, I mean, you're absolutely right, is that these platforms have to be very careful about how they present any type of ad media, because there's a pushback of users. There's an inundation of advertising now. And you don't want to see the influencer that you're following on Instagram look like a bloody NASCAR with all of its different branded references in each and every one of the posts.
Yeah. Then they just look like a sellout. And, the whole point of the influencer is that they are someone who curates what they choose to recommend to people.
Right. So we'll watch that from afar. These platforms have to be careful, I think, now more than ever before, or they're going to be divested of the consumers, and they'll just go into different platforms where it's not just a smattering of ads all over the place. All right, so Marketing Dive gave us an article from Robert Williams. Now, here's some very interesting news. You need to pay attention to it, because this is going to be, it's already big, and it's going to be even bigger. Google faces possible Justice Department antitrust probe. Reports say that Google may face scrutiny over its dominance in digital advertising and the technology that advertisers and publishers use to buy and sell ads online. So some brief points here, because Google's been fighting in the EU for years, and they're on their third antitrust fine, if I'm not mistaken. Some key points. This just got opened up, and you better believe the Trump administration has been looking at these tech giants, and this is the first real big swing at the antitrust concept here for Google in the States. U.S. Department is preparing for this antitrust and dominates the internet search industry and controls about 37% of digital ads in the U.S. market. The department actually reached an agreement with the Federal Trade Commission, which shares antitrust authority, that will oversee any investigation of Google's practices. Google may actually face a good deal of scrutiny over its dominance in that space. And media companies such as News Corp have actually complained about Google being a middleman in the advertising role. We'll certainly have all of the show links on our show post, and this one is especially informative. And we're probably going to have maybe a little bit of additional content inside our show post to be able to kind of watch this timeline of events as it applies to Google, because it is very important. If there is any type of antitrust, which honestly digital marketers far and wide are countering this particular assertion. We've got to watch it, because it does mean a direct influence to how we advertise and where we can advertise. If Google pulls up reins in a particular remarketing front, right, there's going to be a vacuum there. It's going to be an opportunity for other companies, but we got to watch what's happening here. Susan, what's your take on the antitrust signals that are happening right now?
Yeah, I think that's been a question for advertisers for a while. And me personally, having worked on the paid search side, I feel like the focus is less on the overt antitrust piece as it relates to other competitive businesses, but more so about, does Google abuse the information that it gets in order to even create an unfair advantage over the advertisers? So, like, for example,
Right.
they're starting to do things like their own lead gen forms for financial services. Like they're that middleman. And so, they tested out like local service things with locksmiths and stuff up in Silicon Valley. So there's pieces like that it's not even necessarily competition with other businesses, but it's just competition with the business itself,
Right.
kind of inserting itself into not letting the consumer have direct access to that business. And like, at what point is that part not okay? That's usually the piece that I feel like the paid search marketers really notice a lot more, is that, and I think even on the organic side, it's the same problem, right? Where it's like, Google wants to become an answer company, right? And so they don't necessarily even want to drive people to websites. They just want to have the answers. I feel like that's probably the bigger beef and the bigger question on the advertiser side, is like, at what point does that start crossing a line? Do we just accept that that's going to happen because we're using their platform? I think it brings up a lot of those questions.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's very astute, because the Google Express is inserting itself into ad campaigns, and the entire Google Shopping space. They're kind of funding their own ads in that, which they can do. Obviously, it's their sandbox. But all of this middleman conduit positioning and lead gen positioning, we were very concerned about this for a while, especially whenever the get a quote functionality started to actually appear. Holy crap. At that point in time, you're that far many degrees of separation from the bloody service company's website. And now you're going to hold that lead. I
know. We all kind of cringed. We're like, really? This is the way we're going? Like, ugh. I think that's been the biggest focus, at least on my side. Less so. I mean, I think that obviously antitrust, if there were other companies that offered it, they probably wouldn't take those bold moves, but it's just those are the ones that we feel every day from just a day-to-day perspective that
absolutely
impact that kind of decision making.
Bit of an overreach, and again, we'll watch this and keep our listeners updated. If you're not paying attention to it, you certainly do need to jump in and learn what's going on, because it is going to affect everyone. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more of our content, or especially more of this week's featured guest, including a full-length interview, head on over to YouTube and search for Edge of the Web. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you want to see digital marketing news as it happens.